We're going looking at the 2019 and 2018 Passive House questions. So these are always question 10 on the exam paper. Now, question 10 Passive House, question 3 House Redesign, and question 6 the Low Environmental Design Housing are all kind of similar questions. So the notes that are needed for Passive House can be used on the other 2 questions. So if you study this whole topic, you can answer up to 3 questions on the paper. We'll go through the question for 2019 first of all. So it says the plan and elevation of a bungalow built in the 1970s are shown. The wall BB is facing south. The owners intend to carry out a deep retrofit upgrade of their house to meet the Enerfit Passive House standard. First thing is, if you hear Enerfit or nearly zero or any of those terms, it's all the same thing. It's all Passive House. So they try and throw you off with some of these weird names. I wouldn't worry about those. It's all the same topic, Passive House. So forget anything else. If you're doing question 10, it's Passive House. Using notes and freehand sketches, outline 3 design considerations necessary to achieve the Enerfit Passive House design standard. So this is kind of like question 3. You're upgrading the house. So you're not designing a new house here. When they mention design considerations, you're talking about things like, so you need kind of buzzwords. You're talking about things like solar gain, so that's getting sunlight into the house. You've got energy demand, so in other words, how much energy this house uses. That means heat and light. You've got heat loss, so in other words, how quickly the house will lose in heat. Thermal mass is another word, or another term that talks about how the house will store the heat. You've got the layout, so in other words, the layout of the rooms that will be best for a passive house, and then orientation is with your north-south facing axis. In other words, we can't change the orientation of this house because it's fixed in place, so we won't really be able to talk about that too much. But when you're talking about the design considerations on this question, you can talk about solar gain, energy demand. So in other words, you can talk about putting in bigger windows, big south-facing windows. Energy demand, in other words, you can talk about changing the heating system and upgrading it. The layout, you can change the layout of this house around, things like that. Part B then, discuss in detail using notes and freehand sketches how you would retrofit the given house to include each consideration. So in other words, you're going to talk, it's nearly a continuation of the same question. You're going to talk about them in part A, and then you're going to go into a little bit more detail on how you do it in part B. Part C then discuss 2 advantages of retrofitting an existing house to the Passive House standard. So it's always the same thing. Reduced energy bills, reduced CO2 emissions. It's going to be a more comfortable house to live in. Those are always your big 3. The 2018 question then, when we get to a similar kind of question, using notes and freehand sketches, discuss the importance of any 2 of the following in Passive House design. So again, these are your design considerations. So you've got space heating, that's energy demand. You've got building form, so that is the shape of the house and the construction of it. So in other words, the layout, the overall shape of the house, is it L-shaped, is it 2-story, is it a bungalow, as well as things like what type of walls, what type of foundations you might put in. Thermal bridging. Thermal bridging is conduction of heat. So in other words, if you lose heat through the foundation, if you lose heat through the jambs of the window or the doors, that's all thermal bridging. The drawing shows a preliminary design of a dwelling house having 2 bedrooms and a bathroom upstairs. The clients wish to upgrade the design to meet the Passive House standard. Show using notes and freehand sketches 3 modifications that you would make to the house to meet the Passive House standard. Justify your choices. So you have to explain them with notes and sketches, always using sketches. So here you're talking about things like big south-facing windows, putting renewable energies on it, so solar collectors on the roof, photovoltaic tiles on the roof. Any of those kind of ideas is what you're talking about. You might change the layout. So again, it's the same headings. These are back into your design considerations. You might change the layout of the house. Part 3 then, show using notes and freehand sketches a preferred orientation for your upgraded design. Include the sun path in your sketch and discuss your preferred orientation, or how your preferred orientation ensures the optimum thermal performance of the house. So in other words, this is turning the house to face the sun. Sun path diagram, and you're going to put that layout in. So in other words, you want your bedrooms facing east, main living area facing south, and then your sitting room facing west. Bathrooms and utility rooms, things like that, would face north if possible. The notes are going to be attached in the assignment as well. So your notes are here. So the Passive House notes, you've got your orientation there. That's part of your sun path diagram. two possibilities there. You've got possible layouts. You're talking about glazing, so you'd upgrade glazing when you're talking about retrofitting a house. Open plan, always in a passive house. You've got some of your design details, so insulated foundations, wall details, roof detail, and so on. You've got your energy demand, so you've got what's called primary energy demand and secondary energy demand. So primary energy demand is what the house runs on. So is it running on coal? Does it run on wind power? Does it run on peat? Does it run on oil or gas? Secondary then is how much the house itself will use. So in other words, the electricity and the home heating system. You've got your solar collectors, indoor environment, so you're going to talk about mechanical heat recovery in these houses is one of the design considerations. Mechanical heat recovery is covered there. And then your advantages and disadvantages are at the end. Also, you'll have included is upgrading insulation. So if you're retrofitting a house, you've got three ways of upgrading the wall insulation. You can pump the cavity, that won't get you to passive house standard. You have internal insulation, so in other words, fixing dry lining to the inside of the house. So internally on the house, you insulate the internal walls. And then the other option is if you've got an old house with solid walls, you can fix on external insulation. If you're going to do a passive house, this would be it. A 1970s house would have a cavity wall. So if you're going to upgrade the wall of a 1970s house that has a cavity, you'd pump the cavities first, and then you'd also come along and put on the external render onto the house to achieve the passive house standard. And then you've got advantages and disadvantages of upgrading the insulation. Alright, give those two questions a go there, 2018 and 2019.